Okay, so you have your list of materials. You have a folder that has sections in here for storing, and it has some labels for you to write on. I would suggest you wait until you review everything before you start making your organization system, because you may change your mind. The book, you need a copy of the book. The book comes in English, or there is an English and Spanish together for a Tumbleweed Stew by Susan Stevens Crummell. And the Spanish has English and Spanish listed together on one page. Then we have the set of lesson plans. We have first a colored copy, and what the colored copy is essentially like a vertical alignment like you see with text in kindergarten through 12th grade. So it has the pre-K 4 guidelines or outcomes that are taught in the lesson, as well as what that would look like in pre-K 3, in 18 to 36 months, in 8 to 18 months, and in 0 to 8 months. And the age group breakdown is based on the breakdown that's used in the infant, toddler, 3-year-old early learning guidelines. That is the breakdown that they use. And all of these indicators or behaviors or skills are taken from either the infant, toddler, 3-year-old early learning guidelines, Texas's Early Learning Pathways, or the Pre-Kindergarten Guidelines book. Then you have the lesson plans for each age group. The lesson plan includes the objective, what the pre-K 4 outcome is, the skills, the materials, and the lessons. And the lessons are scripted out with exactly what you would say when presenting the lesson, so that you could essentially take this home, review it, and do the lesson tomorrow with all the materials that are provided. There's a reminders, notes, and comments section that gives you things to think about, ways you could extend the lesson, have a variation of the lesson. And then when you move down into the younger age groups, it lists those same behaviors, skills, or outcomes from that are listed on this vertical alignment are listed on the sheet, as well as those pre-K 4 end of year outcomes, so that you can see the big picture. Here's what that looks like in the age group that I'm teaching, but this is the overall big picture in the pre-K 4. So with Tumbleweed Stew, we did some science lesson. Then we also have a math lesson, and it's the same process. So it has the vertical alignment with the different lessons. So we have a counting lesson, we have a adding and subtracting lesson, we have a classification or sorting lesson, patterns, and data and graphing lessons. And so the lesson plans for each of those are here, following the exact same format as science, as well as a template you can use for teaching patterns, and a template that you can use to help with sorting. With fine arts, the same process. So we have what the lessons would be, with the vertical alignment, and then the lesson. Now you'll notice that on the dramatic expression for 0 to 8 months, there is nothing listed, because there is not a lesson that's written for that age group in this series. And that's based on the way that the child behaviors are listed. There were none that related to that lesson for that age group. And then we move on to literacy. With literacy, we have the vocabulary lesson, we have a letter wall lesson, reading the story lesson, and a writing and drawing combined lesson that's a fine arts as well as literacy. And we have them all exact same format as all of the others, where there's the objective, the skills, the lessons, the reminders. There's also, you'll see in a minute, the vocabulary cards. And these are the same pictures used on the vocabulary cards, but these are for you to use in adding the words to your letter wall. So it gives you the exact same picture. You can cut it out and glue it on to however you do your letter wall, whether you use sentence strips and you handwrite it, you print them out on the computer. Whichever format you use, you can still use this same picture to put on your letter wall. So we have the 3 sets of vocabulary cards. These are in sheet protectors, and they're done that way to simply show you that you can create these materials in variety of ways. It doesn't have to be something that's expensive. It doesn't have to be laminated. It could be done with a sheet protector. It could be done with clear contact paper. However is best for you to put the materials together, you can do it in that way. On the ones here in the sheet protector, these also go with the science lesson. So the front of the page has what the vegetable is, a picture of that vegetable, and then the back side contains information about how they grow. So this is information on how onions grow, a picture of that growing process, and then what sort of nutrients that the vegetable has. So you can use this in both your vocabulary and in your science lesson. You can also use them in your dramatic play if you're assigning them to children to use, to hold, and I'm going to play the part of the onion and then move over into going with the animal that brings the onions to the stew. The cards that are just laminated have the word, a picture, the definition, and then a sentence that uses that word in a sentence that's related to the picture, as well as the sentence where the word appears in the book. The animal cards have the name of the animal, a picture of the animal, and then some facts about the animal. This is to help. You can use this also with a science lesson, and then to just give the children more information about each animal, and we've included things that are maybe a little catchy or a little different about each animal. We also have a black cauldron, or in the book it's called a big pot, that you can use with your dramatic play, retelling of the story, along with plastic models of the vegetables. If you can use the actual carrot with the green still attached, that would be great. But we have provided the plastic vegetables here, and all of the vegetables from the story are indeed included in that. Then you have a set of what is referred to in the lessons as vegetable manipulatives. That is these. There's peas, carrots, corn, and an eggplant. And those are used in the lesson for the math lessons, for sorting, for adding, subtracting, and a pair of tongs that you can use to pick up the vegetables and to work on your fine motor skills with the children. So remember that all of the outcomes, behavior, skills that are listed on those lesson plans have come from one of these 3 books. This is the Infant, Toddler, 3-Year-Old Early Learning Guidelines, Texas's Early Learning Pathways, or the Pre-Kindergarten Guidelines. And this book bridges the gap between the 3-year-old guidelines, and the kindergarten guidelines. These 3 books are referenced throughout the training. They are books that we have provided our centers with, and they are very resourceful and used to give variations or additional lessons. It will say, consult the complete resource book for 2s and toddlers on page, and you can look there for additional activities that you can do in each one.
Tumbleweed Stew by Susan Stevens Crummell, illustrated by Janet Stevens. Jack Rabbit opened his eyes. He stretched and looked up at the pretty blue sky. Jack's tummy growled. He thought, the sun is up. The sky is blue. What a great day for tumbleweed stew. He hopped along, jumped over brush and cactus. Before long, he came to a big gate. Over the gate, it said 2 Circle Ranch. Jack slipped under the fence and into a herd of cattle. Moo, said Longhorn. Move on. Well, howdy, Jack said. How do you do? How would you like some tumbleweed stew? There's no such thing as tumbleweed stew, said Longhorn, munching the dry grass. Not a nice place, thought Jack. He ran down the path to the ranch house. Anyone home? He called. No, he heard from inside. Go away. How about some lunch? Asked Jack. Armadillo came out to the porch. This is my ranch, she said. This is my food, and you can't have any. Jack took a chance. He said, but I would like to cook for you. Have you heard of tumbleweed stew? There's no such thing as tumbleweed stew, Armadillo said. Before Armadillo could blink, Jack started a fire. He spied an old pot and filled it with water. He set the pot on the water on the fire. He set the pot of water on the fire. After a while, he stuffed a big tumbleweed into the pot. Armadillo looked into the pot. Jack took a taste and said, it smells good. It tastes good too, but it needs more, this tumbleweed stew. Well, said Armadillo, there might be some carrots in my house. Soon the tumbleweed and carrots were cooking in the big pot. Buzzard floated down to take a look. I can smell this food way up in the sky. It needs onions, he said. I'll fly home and get some. Soon the tumbleweed, carrots, and onions were cooking in the big pot. Then Deer trotted over and looked into the pot. This stew needs some corn, he said. I'll be right back. Soon the tumbleweed, carrots, onions, and corn were cooking in the big pot. Skunk scampered up to the pot. Smells good, she said. But where are the potatoes? I'll go dig some up. Soon the tumbleweed, carrots, onions, corn, and potatoes were cooking in the pot. Rattlesnake slithered over with some celery. You can't make a stew without celery, he said. Soon the tumbleweed, carrots, onions, corn, potatoes, and celery were cooking in the big pot. Armadillo, buzzard, deer, skunk, and rattlesnake gathered around the pot of stew. They watched it bubble and steam. At last, Jack cried. It took a while, but thanks to you, it's time to eat this tumbleweed stew. The animals ate and ate until every bite of stew was gone. Armadillo couldn't move. Buzzard couldn't fly. Deer couldn't trot. Skunks couldn't scamper. Rattlesnake couldn't slither. They put their heads down and fell asleep. Jack slept too, but not for long. Jack Rabbit opened his eyes. He stretched and looked up at the pretty blue sky. His tummy growled. He thought, another day for being sly. What a great day for cactus pie. The end.
So this book was written by, you remember when we've had the authors come, the Funny Sisters, and they do their little teaching routine that one of them writes and one of them illustrates. So this is one of their books. And so this lesson planning with books, this series is kind of a spin-off from that to help you to move past, that was a really neat time, now what are we going to do with it in our classroom? And then it's also an extension of our Texas Early Learning Pathways training that a lot of you came to in September. It was on the Saturday, and then we also had it on a Thursday where we were in the big room. So this is kind of a combination of those two things. So how can you now take those things and move it into your classroom? So the first lesson that we're going to start with looking today, so you can see what in the world has Karen done, besides like almost killing myself trying to get it all ready for you, but I'm happy to have done it because I think it's going to be really, really useful and really help you to get some things going that we've talked about. And now you can kind of see, what does that really look like? We talk about it, but how do I do that? And so I've tried to help you to see how you can do it, and then you can do this with other books of your own. So we're going to start with literacy, which is your yellow, and then your stapled lessons behind that. And then you have the 2 pages with the colored pictures. So let's look first at the yellow. So what this is, as you can see, a bunch of words. It is what I did, I took the pre-K 4 skills that are listed in the pre-K guidelines book that looks like this, okay? And tied those to a lesson. So we have the vocabulary instruction lesson, which we're going to look at those in a minute. But these are the outcomes or the guidelines or the skills that are in the pre-K 4 that are covered in this lesson. Then what does that look like in a pre-K 3? What does it look like in an 18 to 36-month-old child? 8 to 18, and 0 to 8 months. So remember, in the Texas Early Learning Pathways, we talked about that we have that early skill, and then it builds on that for the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and then we land at that pre-K 4 skill. Remember? That's what this is. So what does vocabulary instruction look like in that 0 to 8 months all the way through over to the pre-K 4. So all of the things in the 0 to 8 months through pre-K 3 are things that I pulled from these 2 books. So in looking at the vocabulary lesson, what of the outcomes listed in these 2 books relate to that lesson? So I went through and I listed them all out for you. Some of the questions from the Early Learning Pathways training was, okay, but how do I teach this? How do I teach the different indicators and the behaviors? So that's what this is. This is to help you see. This is how you would teach it. So I want you to take just a minute and look at there's multiple pages because there's multiple lessons. So this first page is a vocabulary lesson. It's actually the first 2 pages. Then you have a letter wall lesson. So you'll notice on that letter wall lesson, which is your 3rd page, that in 0 to 8 months there's nothing in that column. Okay? And that's because typically you wouldn't have a letter wall lesson for that age group. If you do one, does that mean it's wrong? No, it doesn't mean it's wrong. You can do that, but most people don't, but it's fine if you do, okay? And then if you keep looking through, then you see there's a reading the story lesson. And then the last page is writing and fine art with drawing. So I combined writing and drawing together in one lesson. And again, there's not a 0 to 8 month lesson. Does that mean you can't do a drawing or some sort of project? No, it doesn't. You can do that if you would like to do so. So the reason that we gave you all of it is so that you can see, how does this relate? How does my piece that I'm teaching to my kids fit into the big puzzle? But also, you know that kid that's in your classroom that doesn't quite have it, whatever the skill is. So maybe they're a pre-K 4, they don't have all of these skills, and so you need to go back and look at what's happening. What can I do that's in that pre-K 3 lesson that I can then teach to that child or to this class? Maybe they're missing a whole skill set. And so you might even have to go down 2 levels and look at how you can help fill in that gap for that child. So that's why you have all of it. And then who knows, as you all know, sometimes you jump around in your rooms. Maybe you've been teaching pre-K 3 and now you're the infant teacher. So this way you have it still. You can flip in your trusty folder and say, Karen gave me some lessons for that. This will kind of give me a starting place to create more lessons. Okay, then looking at your stapled papers, each age group is stapled together. So if you teach 0 to 8 months, you have 2 pages and 2 lessons. And packaged this way, we thought it would be easier for you to look at the age that you spend the most time with. But before we jump into the white paper lessons really quick, let's take a minute, and I'm not going to read it out loud to you, but I want you to look at your yellow sheet and which age group do you teach the most, and kind of get an idea. Read through that column of outcomes or behaviors or skills that the children in your class should have, and just so you kind of have an idea of the things that we're addressing when we talk about the lessons in a minute. And I'm going to be quiet and let you read for just a second. Okay, so now find the packet that is, and hold it in your hand, that is the one that you teach the most, the age group that you work with the most. And just hold on to them. We're not going to read every lesson. We're going to kind of do an overview of these lessons. And if you have questions, please do raise your hand. We can answer them right now. If you don't want to ask them right now, then write it down. Come see me after. You can see Sandra. You can see any of us after. And we're happy to help you. So the first lesson is on vocabulary instruction. So all of the age levels have a lesson titled Vocabulary Instruction. It just looks different for each age group, okay? So using there, it lists out what are the objectives, what are the skills that are being taught. If you have something other than pre-K 4, it lists all of those skills that were on your yellow, but it also gives you the pre-K 4 skills, so you can help keep that in mind, that this is the ultimate goal. This is where we're headed with these lessons. Then I've listed out for you the materials that you need. Most of these materials I've provided for you, whether you have them in your hands right now or they're in your big pot that you'll take home later. Then you have the actual lesson. And then you have some notes, reminders, comments. And that's also a place where I've listed for you like maybe some modifications or variations, other ways you can use the lesson are listed in that section. So with your vocabulary cards, the reason that you have them that look in different ways is to show you you don't have to spend a lot of money. This isn't about having fancy laminated colored copies. You can use simple sheet protectors and create the same thing. You could print on cardstock. One of the reasons that we suggest that you do have some sort of protective cover is because, as you know, they're going to do this, right? And they're going to do this, and they're going to take it from your hand, and that way it's somewhat protected, and you can kind of smooth it back out and use it again, right? Especially little people, little bitty people, and we want them to explore it. We want them to look at it. We want them to feel it, to see it. You know, I know for me, sometimes people say, well, look at this, and I'll say, let me. I mean, I'm not in pre-K 4 or under, and I say, let me see that, because I want to hold it. Sometimes it's a glare, sometimes I just need to, that really helps me to solidify whatever it is I'm looking at. So with your, so that's why you have them done in different ways. So you can see, you can put it in sheet protector, you can just laminate it plain, you can use clear contact paper, which is a cheaper alternative than laminating if you don't have the capacity to laminate. You can put it on construction paper. And you know, my initial plan, I will confess, was I was going to have all of them on construction paper for you. But the gluing got the best of me, and I said, I can't get it all done. I had my daughter, we had in the garage all these tables spread out, and we had this assembly line of gluing, flipping, and I'd set it all out. We'd do 25 at a time, and then I'd knock on the window, and she'd come out, and I'd glue, and she'd flip, and then I'd pick them all up, and after like 3 nights of that, I said, okay, no more. We can't do this anymore. I love you, but I can't get it all done. It's not possible for me to do it. But then I thought, well, this is a good plan B. I like it because it also shows you different ways that you can prepare your materials and have them ready. So it's a little tricky, but we got it done. So it gives you, actually, in those lessons, what are you going to say? And it tells you what you're going to do. The one I picked up is pre-K 4. It says, read the story, Tumbleweed Stew, without stopping. Then say. All of your lessons are like that. They'll say, tell you what to say, questions to ask, things along those lines, okay? It references on there the say, do, tell routine, and that comes out of the Circle Teacher's Manual, which all of you should have at your center. You probably don't have one each, but you should have one of these in your center. Ask your director. If you don't have one, let me know and I will get you one. And this is a very useful book. You can open it. I open to here. This is letter sounds. It talks about why you need to teach it, like what is the purpose, why is it important. It gives you an activity. Here's sound sort. Tells you the materials you need and what you're going to do. And it follows that same format. Say. Let's name all of the things that begin with the letter M and make up sound. Name the items together. So it tells you exactly what to do in this book. Now, some of the things, of course, you are going to have to do some modification. For example, with your babies, little babies, you are not going to expect them to be able to know, say, and comprehend the word trot, okay? But you still want to say it with them. And in the lesson, it still says, and ask them for a response, or ask them to say trot. Is that 2-month-old baby going to say trot? Probably not. Is the 8-month-old baby going to say trot? Yeah, maybe. Probably not. Though my niece, not kidding, she was 9 months old. We went to the zoo, and she points and she said, chicken. And I looked at my sister and I said, she said chicken. She said, yeah, she says chicken. I said, she's 9 months old. She's not supposed to say chicken. And she said, well, I know, but she says chicken. And I said, okay, okay. So unless you are Mackenzie, you may not say chicken or trot at that age. So why, Crazy Karen, are you saying to ask them to say a response? A lot of times they'll say something. It might be babbling, it might be cooing, but what you're wanting is for them to give that response. Or if they don't say anything, that's okay too. But that's a procedure, right, that you're going to do when you get in the next classroom, the next classroom, the next classroom, is that whole sound and response. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to make an answer. So it's kind of an early learning. Also, children can learn a lot of words. They may not be able to have them come out of their mouth, but they can understand, they can comprehend. And so this is working on that receptive language, which is hearing the language and understanding what's heard, right? Remember, we talked about that in the early learning pathways. So that's why Crazy Karen has that in your lesson plan, because it's still important for them to do and go through. But again, we don't expect them to know that the definition of trot is if a person or animal trots, they run slowly, taking short, regular steps. Okay? So, since I'm holding this card, the way that the card is, there's the word, there's the picture, there's the definition, and then I made a sentence for you. I tried to make the sentence reflect the picture. And then there's the sentence from the book, where that word is used in the book. On the one for Sly, my sentence refers to Dora the Explorer, but it has a picture of a regular fox and not Swiper the fox, because I cannot use that because that's a licensed image. So that's why I did it in that way. If you think, again, why did Crazy Karen put that fox and then a sentence about Dora? Because I think Dora and Swiper the fox is something they can relate to. They know that Swiper is sneaky. He takes things that are not his. He takes Dora and Boots and everybody's things, and so he's very sly, just like the jackrabbit in the story, how he tricked everyone into feeding him with their vegetables for his stew. On your animal cards, there's obviously the picture, the word, and then some brief information about that animal. And that's to help the children to learn to relate to that and to learn some tricky facts. I tried to pick out things that were actually even kind of surprising to me. And in fact, while I was my oldest daughter is the one who helped me glue, and I would say, did you know that? And she was like, no, I didn't know that. And so it was kind of a fun thing even for me to learn. Now, are you going to use, with your babies, are they going to learn that skunks, what is something here? They live in homes made by other animals, hollow logs, or even empty buildings. Probably not in those terms. Is it wrong for you to read that to them? No, it's not wrong, because again, we're trying to give them language, language, language. And sometimes, you know, when you are the only adult in the room and none of the children are talking, you kind of start getting like you're feeling like you're crazy Karen, because you're talking all the time, and this gives you something else to say, to talk about, are the animals on these cards. And then in looking at your vegetable cards, we have what is the vegetable, and then on the back side you have, this is more for the science lesson, but it has information about the vegetable. How are they grown? What part do we eat? And what kind of nutrients it has in them. So in your vegetable basket, you have all of those vegetables. So if you're able, I can't preserve a carrot for you, so that's why I had to get you plastic, but if you have the ability in your center to bring in a real carrot with the little leafy top, that is also a way to make it very concrete and for the children to learn. And the corn with the little, you know, the little tassel on the top, and the silks and the husks and all of those pieces, because many times, because you serve it in your center, they've eaten corn, but do they know that corn looks like this when it grows? Do they know that that what they eat? Mashed potatoes, they eat French fries, of course, but do they know that this is what potatoes look like as a whole potato? And so that's why you have the pictures of each one, and you can, and then all of the vegetables from the story are in your basket. In your manipulatives, you do have an eggplant. I tried to get those to match as best I could, but you do have an eggplant here, and then you have a little foam eggplant in your manipulatives. You also have peas in your manipulatives, but you have the carrots and the corn that are talked about in our story, and celery. So your pictures, those little tiny pictures, those are the same pictures as on all of those vocabulary cards. And this is for your letter wall. Some of you use a letter wall where you use a sentence strip and you write the word. Some of you print it out. So you can do it. So that's why I didn't make you the sentence strips or the words to put on there. I gave you the picture so you could add them yourself to your letter wall. And in thinking about a letter wall, I was at a center this last week, and the teacher had a space, and she had her letters up, and there was nothing on the letter wall. And so I said, tell me please about your letter wall. And she said, well, she's in a Head Start, and so they have a mentor teacher. And she said, my mentor teacher said, I have to have this, but I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with it. She told me to hang it up, and I followed directions, and now it's hanging up. So let's talk very briefly about a letter wall, what you would use it for, how you would use it, the best way to use it, all of those good things. So any word that you're teaching, even if it's carrots, you want to put on your letter wall. Now, as children get older and they're like in elementary school, they're not going to put things like carrots on their wall. They're just going to put things on their wall that are what we call a tier 2 word, a harder word that you need to teach. But at this point, we're wanting kids to learn. This says carrot, or carrots, and this is what carrots look like. If this were my letter wall and I had my A here, you want to make sure that if it's a proper noun that you use a capital letter, but otherwise carrots, well, carrots would be my C, right? So if I were to put carrots, I'm not going to make a capital C because it doesn't begin with a capital letter, okay? And then think about, too, what does your print look like? Some of you have very flowery handwriting, and it's beautiful, but does the letter get lost in that? Can the kids see? I was also at another center, and the kid was supposed to match the letter Q, which was very plain circle with the little line, with a different Q, and that Q had a circle, and then the bottom had a little loopy that came out like that. Well, he couldn't find it because it didn't look like the Q he knew, which was this. So I had to say, oh, this is Q, and he looked, and he said, well, okay, and then he went on because that did not say Q to him, okay? So you want the C's in carrot or the A's here, all of those letters to line up. So I would want to have apple and have my A. If I have a Leah in my classroom, I would want her A to line up down in a straight line. So some people say, well, I want to put the picture first and then I want to put the word. That's fine. You can see, though, from even the little sheet that I gave you, the pictures vary in size. And so as long as you have like a designated space, I'm going to allow 3 inches or whatever it may be for my picture, and then the word, I think that's fine. You might find it easier to put the picture after the word so that you can have your letters to line up all together. And then in thinking about the pictures, don't get hung up on the picture. Part of the reason for the picture is for them to start to associate that makes a word. So thinking about a place that is on almost every corner and it has this as part of its logo, right? That by itself is a M. But what do the kids say? That says McDonald's, okay? So don't get hung up on the picture. If the picture, you're just wanting them to associate it. So if it's a stick figure drawing, that's fine. I was in a teacher's classroom the other day, and that's what she had. She had all these little, she had sentence strip, paper. She'd written the word, and she had a little, figure drawn on there. That's fine. That's fine. Well, that's what we're wanting them to see. You can cut it out of a magazine. You can print it, whatever. People will say, well, where do you find those pictures? Google is my friend, okay? If you don't know how to do it, find you a 15-year-old or younger, and they know how to do it. So as I was getting the pictures ready for this, I would pull it up and I would say to my kids, does this say spied? Was this say spied to you? And they'd say, oh, no, that doesn't say that. Okay, so I'd go back and find another picture. Does this say spied? Because I wanted them to kind of relate that. But they know how to do it. So I don't have a resource that says this is the best place for pictures. You find them yourself. Go on the internet. Go in a magazine. Draw something, whatever you need to do to get your pictures for your letter wall. Do you want to add anything else to that info about the letter wall? So then people will ask, well, how long do I leave those things up there? there's no right way, there's no wrong way to use it. With this, I think you have 23 words. So if you did this over the course of 1 week, and the next week you do another book with 23 words, unless you have this for your letter wall, which none of you do, I don't know how you can keep it all up there. So maybe you want to have them up as a theme. Once you're done with Tumbleweed Stew, then you're going to take it down. You need to decide that. Maybe you leave child names, your student names up the whole year and take down and add words as you go through the year. You decide the best way. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. Some people say, oh, once it's on the wall, it should stay there, it shouldn't come off. Some people say it needs to have Velcro so that they can take it off. Some people say you should have multiple copies, so if I have it and it is stuck on my wall, then I have an additional set that they can flip through and they can use for using in a lesson. Again, no right way, no wrong way. You do what works best for you. Does anybody have questions about letter wall? Does that help on how to use the letter wall? I think a lot of you are teaching a lot of words. They're just not making it to the letter wall. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think the background for the letter wall definitely needs to be a dark color, or so there's a contrast? I think that's up to you. Okay.
I do think that it's up to you as well. I think that as long as, I don't know that I would put a print behind it or something that's really flowery or really busy, because you don't want the words to get lost in that busyness. But does it have to be black? Can it be yellow? I think it can be.
Yeah, I think you can do it however you want, but you do want
To say, with the older children, you might say, okay, where would we put spied on our letter wall? It would go with the letter that makes the sound. What letter is that? It's all curvy. You're not going to do that with your little people. You would say, we're going to put this with the letter S. It starts with the letter S. And here's our letter S on the wall. So it's scaled back for what you're expecting the children to give you in terms of feedback. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Gail, you had a question? Did we
Yeah, no, all I was going to say is if you just took the picture with the word.
Anything else on any of those lessons? Okay, we've worked on the word carrot. So as we listen to carrot, let's see. When I say carrot, you do thumbs up, you pat your head, whatever kind of response you want them, so that you know they're listening for that special word as you read the story. You guys, this is the 4th time you've done Tumbleweed Stew, and so I give you carrots, I give you celery, and then when you say those, then whoever has that one holds it up, that they heard it. This is the one that I am representing. So there's a lot of variations that you can do, and I've tried to list a lot of those out for you in the lessons. So the writing and the drawing lesson just briefly also talks about going back to that letter wall for the older kids. You're asking them to draw their favorite scene from the book. Maybe they like the part where the skunk, she digs up the potatoes, and so that's what they've drawn. And so you can have them go back to the letter wall. Where is skunk on the letter wall? Where can we find it? The child finds it. You can help them to write the word skunk. If they're able to do it themselves, great. If not, you can provide that support. Okay? Do you have anything you want to say? Okay. You had that look kind of like, so I just wanted to make sure. And so my book has these little turkey feathers in it. These are the little Post-it notes. And the reason I put them all in here was because in the reading the story lesson, you may need to do something along these lines if you're asking for the child to make a response to the different words that are said. So you may need little flags there. Now, I know this is a lot of flags, and so you may not be looking at all of these every time. Maybe today you taught carrots, and so you would only have carrots marked in here. You wouldn't have all of these. I stuck them all in there just as a visual for you so you can see. I divided them up for myself, and I have animals are green, words for direct instruction like the verbs are in yellow, and the pink are the foods. Is that the only way you can do it? Absolutely not. Maybe you do green is the things you taught on the first day. Yellow are the things you taught on the second day. It's your decision, but that's why you got the package of flags so that you can make some turkey feathers on your book. And maybe you don't need that, but I know that I do because I cannot remember all of it, especially as we're reading through the story. So any questions on the literacy lessons? All right. So let's move on to fine arts. The dramatic expression lessons are the retelling of the story using your, oh, my pot's gone. Using, did you take my pot? That's okay. Using the pot and the vegetables that are in your basket. And you can assign different people to be the characters in the story. When they're young, maybe you, thank you, maybe you need, they maybe need to hold their card so that they can remember I'm the skunk, especially if you take turns and you do it in the course of the week. They may not remember that they're the skunk today because yesterday they were the jackrabbit. That's okay, that's okay. You don't have to bring them all back. It is a beautiful setup. And so you have the lessons for that, and then because the drawing is fine arts, you have that same lesson that you saw in your literacy is repeated in your fine art packet, but it is the exact same lesson. I just wanted you to see how it can live in both places. Okay, moving to science. This is talking about how vegetables grow, things you can plant in your, maybe you're going to plant a bean in your classroom, maybe you plant a bean with a wet paper towel in a baggie so that they can see how roots grow, especially knowing that in several of these vegetables, the part that we eat is the part that grows in the ground, like on the carrots and the potatoes. What we eat, you don't see that when it's growing. You only see the greenery. And then you pull the carrots out and ta-da, there they are. And this is the part we eat on the bottom. It talks about the nutrients that are in there. Now, with your little bitty people, are you going to share that it has riboflavin, vitamin B6, and pantothenic acid? Probably not. But what you would say is that there are good vitamins that are in the celery that are good for your body. So you need to read this in advance so that you can know what you would edit out for your children in your class. You could do a science lesson again with the animal cards with facts about the animals. Again, all of that information is in your lesson plans. Any questions about either of those two? I don't think I asked that on the other one. And then moving on to your math, you have in pre-K 4, you have counting, adding and subtracting, sorting, patterns, and data and graphing. So on the little people, it talks about things being, you know, be mindful that it's a choking hazard. These are foam, so they're like a squishy ball thing. So be mindful that, you know, that they don't actually try to take a chunk out of them. If it's, you know they are, maybe you do it one-on-one because you're working on them grabbing and reaching for things. Maybe you demonstrate with them on the counting, 1, and then you pick up another, 2. So you could use them in a variety of ways. You have your tongs. You may have to they're kind of stiff, but to work on fine motor skills, picking up the vegetables with their tongs, like me, dropping them with their tongs, creating patterns, sorting. So you have 24 vegetables. So you can sort them. You can do all kinds of things with them. You can use your tongs for other lessons. Of course, any of this you can incorporate into other lessons. We just tried to give you enough that you can start with these things.